Oh, hi. It's so good to see you again. Long time no see. The last time I think we talked, I was showing you how to put Conway's Game of Life into Blender. And today I am going to show you the missing ingredient, creating an initial configuration customized by you. So I believe this is where we left off. We have a working Conway using cubes with a random configuration. Now you cannot make your own configuration based on the tutorial that I gave you, and I apologize profusely. What you can do at this point is you can change the seed, clear the cache, execute the node tree, and now you have a new random configuration. But what if you want like a glider? What if you want some other interesting Conway configuration? And you're never going to find it by like going through the seeds, right? Maybe you will. No. Let's do it manually. There are a couple of ways that you can do this manually. One is to override this starting locations input. Get that out of there. So the starting locations comes in here, and that's this variable, right? So if I go up here and say starting locations equals this list, okay? I'm basically now I'm ignoring this input here. I'm like, nah, I don't want that. I want it to be this list. It's a vector 0, 0. Okay, so the starting locations is just 0, 0. If I clear the cache and then I execute the node tree, now at frame 0, make sure you're at frame 0, and there you go, 0, 0. That is everything. If I want to be a complete masochist, I am going to hit a comma here. I'm going to control copy, control paste, 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 paste. I'm going to say I want one at vector 1, 0. I want vector 2, 0, and vector 1, 1, because I am a freaking genius and I can just do this all in code. I'm going to clear the cache. I'm going to execute the node tree, and there you go. You have 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, and 1, 1. And as you'd expect, this will run super great. That's cool if you're a savant. I am not, so I devised a graphical approach. Okay, so let's clear the cache, execute the node tree, back to our, what's it called? Random configuration. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I'm going to hide the nodes in the animation nodes object container. This container contains all of the instances that are generated by this node tree, basically over here. Object instancer, okay? This is generating these. I'm going to hide that. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to create cubes here that will act as starter cubes, and then we'll feed that information into our node tree. Let's generate a cube. And to differentiate this cube from these cubes, I'm going to go into the object properties, viewport display, and change it from textured to wire. And now I will be looking at squares. I'm going to tab into edit mode, pressing tab. I'm going to control B, and I'm going to bevel this like I did my other cubes because, frankly, I think it looks nicer. It doesn't really matter if you bevel it or not. I'm going to hit S to scale. I'm going to hit 0.5. And now, if I look at my animation nodes object container, this new cube is the same size as all of my other cubes, which, yeah, that's important. And then I am going to tab out of edit mode. See how nice that looks? So much nicer than just a regular square. I'm going to move this by pressing M, move to a new collection called Starters. You can call this collection whatever you want. I'm just calling it Starters. Doesn't matter, as long as this cube is in its own collection. Okay? Now, when we move this cube, G, we want it to snap to the grid. Go to snapping, turn that on, make sure it's on increment. Now, when you press G, you'll notice that it is snapping, but it's snapping to a tenths of a meter, 1/10 of a meter each snap. Okay, not exactly what we want. If you get out of orthographic view and you say like GX and move it along, you can see that we're getting a full meter with every snap, which is what we want, but we also want to be able to hit numpad 7, go to top orthographic. We want to be able to do that here because it just makes more sense since we're on this two-dimensional grid. In order to get the snapping to work like we want, we need to go to viewport overlays and change the subdivisions to 1. Unfortunately, they are grayed out, and changing them will have absolutely no effect. So fortunately, you can go to the scene properties, go to units, and change metric to none. We're not going to work in metric anymore. We're going to work in units, just, you know, generic units. And let's change the subdivisions down to 1. Okay? So now that we have a unit system of none, our subdivisions are at 1, and snapping is on at increment. If I press G to move, it's going to move exactly like we want it to. Location is 1, 0, 0, 1. See, that's good. That's the money spot. Now we can easily duplicate this by pressing Shift D, move it over. Shift D, move it over, and Shift D, move it up. Now we have the kind of the same configuration that I did in code over here so arduously, so confusingly. Now it's very straightforward. You have 4 cubes. Now be very wary that, like, when you Shift D on this, when you Shift D and you move this and you say, maybe you right click to cancel the move, you still have a cube here. In fact, you have 2 cubes here. And that's going to be a problem because you can't really tell that there are 2 cubes here because they're in the same exact position. They are they're in wireframe, so it's really hard to tell. And if you have overlapping cubes, you're going to have, it's not going to play right. The algorithm is not going to it's not going to like it. So, and you could probably figure out how to fix that. That's out of the scope of this tutorial. But like, as you can see, when I grab this and I move it, there's still a cube there. Just be very careful, especially as you scale up and have more and more cubes. You know, you want to make sure that you're not overlapping any, or else you're going to get weird results. So, good. Now that we have our collection of starters, let's go into our animation nodes. And we can take this whole bit right here. This was giving us our random configuration. We can just move that out of here. I'm going to control right click and cut that off. That is if you have Node Wrangler installed, which you should if you've ever watched a Blender tutorial ever. Not going to explain that right now. So our starting locations now needs to be dictated by this starters collection. So I'm going to Shift A, I'm going to go to Object, collection info. And I want the starters collection. Now I have a list of objects, and that is these 4 cubes. And I want to get the locations of each object, so I'm going to Shift A. Go to Object Transforms Input. Okay. I'm going to stick that objects into here, and now I have the locations of each object, and I just stick that right into the starting locations. And now, if I clear the cache and execute the node tree, make sure I'm on frame 0, and make sure that my animation nodes object container is on. Now you can see that on the first frame everything is as is, and now you can kind of see why I have the wireframe version, so that I don't get confused as things play out, because as you can see I start moving this, and yeah, everything is working as expected. Then I can maybe get a little crazy. I'm going to hit 7 on the numpad. I'm just going to select these 3, and I'm going to Shift D and move them down. Now, I have had issues in the past. For some reason, the snapping wasn't working when I was duplicating multiple, but it seems to be working now. What I did to fix that was I just chose active element as my transform pivot point. Doesn't seem to be a problem at the moment. If it does, just find a transform pivot point that works for you. Take this one, Shift D this down. Doesn't really matter which one you duplicate. Just make sure they're not overlapping, like I said. And then I'm gonna clear the cache, execute the node tree, and nothing is there. Why is that? Because I'm on frame 24, and somewhere along the line everything died. So if I go back to 0, everything's right where you expect it to be, and boom. There you have it. Have fun. If you have any more questions, please let me know, and I'll be happy to answer them. And like me.